There's a difference between being someone and performing someone, even when no one is watching. For most of his life, Frank Sinatra didn't always know where one ended and the other began. For decades, Frank had been Frank Sinatra, not just on stage, but almost everywhere. In restaurants, where he was expected to be charming, generous, larger than life. At home, where even family gatherings sometimes had the feel of an audience waiting to be entertained. Even in quiet moments with close friends, there was often a version of Frank present, confident, controlled, in charge of the room. Because that was what people expected, and in some ways, what he had come to expect of himself. To understand why that evening mattered, it helps to understand what Frank's days had looked like for most of his life. From a young age, he had learned that the world responded to a certain version of him. Confident, witty, generous with a joke or a kind word, never short on charm. That version opened doors. It filled rooms. It made people feel like something exciting was happening, just because he had walked in. Over the years, that version became useful in almost every setting. It helped in negotiations. It helped on stage, obviously. But it also became the version people expected at dinner tables, at family gatherings, even in hospital waiting rooms during hard times. Because that was Frank. And somewhere along the way, Frank had become a kind of public utility, available to everyone, including the people closest to him. The trouble with a role like that is that it doesn't come with an off switch. You don't get to decide each morning whether today's a day you'll be on. It simply becomes how you move through the world. A low hum of performance running underneath everything. So constant that you stop noticing it's there at all. Until, every so often, something interrupts it. A quiet evening. An old friend who doesn't need anything from you. A setting with no audience, no expectation, nothing to manage. One evening, in his later years, at his home in the desert, Frank sat with one of his oldest friends, someone who had known him since before any of it, since the early days in New Jersey, before the fame, before the persona. They sat outside in the cool evening air, with the lights of the house behind them and the desert dark and quiet ahead. At some point in the conversation, Frank simply stopped. Stopped performing. Not dramatically, there was no announcement, no moment where he said, "I'm done pretending." He just got quiet. His shoulders dropped slightly. His voice lost the polish it usually had, even in casual conversation. His friend later said, it was like watching someone take off a heavy coat they'd been wearing for so long they'd forgotten it was there. Frank didn't say much in that quiet stretch. He just sat, looking out at the desert, breathing differently than he had been a few minutes before. When he did speak again, it wasn't about music or shows or any of the things people usually wanted to talk to him about. He talked about being tired, not in a complaining way, but in a simple, honest way. Tired of being on. Tired of a version of himself that, by then, had been running for so long, he sometimes forgot there was another version underneath it. His friend didn't try to fix anything or offer advice, he just sat there too. And for a while, the two of them simply existed together. Two old friends in the dark, saying very little, needing nothing from each other. That was the realization. Quiet and easy to overlook because nothing dramatic happened. That there is a version of yourself that exists underneath whatever role you've been playing. For your career, for your family, for the people who expect a certain version of you. And that version doesn't go away just because it's rarely given room to exist. It just waits. Maybe you've felt that too. Maybe you've spent years being a certain version of yourself, the strong one, the cheerful one, the one who always has it together, the one people rely on. At work, in your family, even in friendships sometimes, where you've quietly taken on the role of the person who listens, who helps, who never quite says what they themselves are feeling. And maybe, like Frank, there have been moments late at night or in a quiet conversation with an old friend where you felt that performance loosen, just slightly. Where you've wanted to simply exist, without managing how you come across, without being on. Here's something gentle to consider. The people who truly love you, the ones who have known you longest, the ones like Frank's old friend from New Jersey, usually aren't asking you to perform. They're often just waiting for the chance to sit with the real version of you, the one underneath. They may have been waiting for a long time. Maybe it's time to let that version exist a little more. Not all at once, and not with everyone, but maybe with one person, someone you trust completely, you could let the performance rest for an evening. Maybe it's time to say out loud something like, "I'm tired," or "I don't really know how I feel about this," or "Can we just sit here for a while?" without explaining it, without managing how it sounds. It's never too late to let someone see the version of you that exists when nothing is being performed. In fact, that version is often the one people have loved all along, even when they've mostly seen the other one. And there's another side to this too, worth sitting with gently. Sometimes we're not the ones performing. We're the ones who, without meaning to, expect a performance from someone else. A spouse who always has to be the strong one. A parent who's expected to always have answers. A friend who's always the funny one, the upbeat one, the one who lifts everyone's mood. If there's someone in your life who plays a role like that, who has for years been the strong one or the cheerful one, maybe part of letting go of control is letting go of that expectation too. Maybe it's time to ask them, gently, "How are you, really?" And then waiting, patiently, for an answer that might take a moment to arrive, because they may not be used to being asked. Giving someone else permission to stop performing can be just as meaningful as claiming that permission for yourself. Sometimes it's the first step, someone else going first, so that you feel safe enough to follow. Frank Sinatra spent decades being one of the most recognizable performers in the world. But on that quiet evening in the desert, what brought him peace wasn't another performance. It was the absence of one. If you're watching this tonight, maybe there's a person or a moment where you could let the performance rest, even briefly. So take a slow breath, and maybe the next time you're with someone you trust, let yourself simply be there. Nothing more, nothing less. You might find, as Frank did, that the quiet that follows isn't empty at all. It's often where the realest parts of a friendship or a life actually live. Underneath the performance, there's usually just a person, tired, human, and glad not to be alone in that. And that person, the one underneath, deserves a little room too. Not instead of who you've become, just alongside it. A little space every now and then where nothing needs to be proven, performed, or explained. It's never too late to make room for that. Tonight could be a good place to start, even if starting just means sitting quietly for a few minutes, exactly as you are. There's something else worth remembering about that night in the desert. Frank's friend didn't ask him any questions. He didn't try to draw him out or fix his tiredness or turn the moment into a conversation about feelings. He simply stayed. And in some ways, that was the whole gift. Not advice, not solutions, just presence. Maybe that's worth remembering too. The next time someone you love seems tired or quiet or less on than usual. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to say the perfect thing. Sometimes the kindest thing you can offer is simply to stay in the room, without needing the moment to become anything other than what it is. And if you're the one who's tired, the one who's been performing for so long that you've nearly forgotten what it feels like not to, maybe tonight is a small invitation. Not to change everything, not to announce anything to anyone, just to notice, quietly, that the performance is there, that it's been running for a long time, and that, every now and then, it's allowed to rest. Frank Sinatra's voice filled concert halls for half a century. But on that quiet night in the desert, the most meaningful sound was the absence of one. Just two old friends, breathing the same evening air, with nothing left to say, nothing left unsaid that truly mattered, and nothing left that needed proving. Not now, not tomorrow, not ever again, for either of them.